Good afternoon, everyone. Shayna Finkelstein here from Coast to Coast Legal Aid of South Florida Good afternoon. Shayna Finkelstein here from Coast to Coast Legal Aid of South Florida Family Law Unit. I represent seniors who are victims of crime. And today we are giving a presentation because it is Elder Abuse Awareness Month. And we'd like to provide you with some helpful information about what types of injunctions are available to you and what you might be able to request in those injunctions and how to obtain them. So there are multiple types of injunctions that you might be able to petition for if you are the victim of elder abuse. There are intimate partner injunctions and there's non-intimate partner injunctions, and it depends how you're related to your abuser. If that is a spouse or a former spouse, or you're related by blood or marriage, or it's someone that you've lived with as if a family, then the injunction that you would apply for is a petition for injunction for protection against domestic violence. Now, if you've dated within the past 6 months, then it would be a dating violence injunction. And if you are the victim of sexual violence, it would be a sexual violence injunction. Now, each one of these injunctions has different standards, different criteria that needs to be met in order to establish that a final judgment of injunction should be issued. There are also not intimate partner injunctions that are for maybe if you're not intimately related to your partner. So I think that a lot of times people might not realize that they can petition for an injunction if their abuser is their neighbor or their caregiver or someone else that maybe a senior is more likely to run into an issue with than somebody else. If this is the type of abuse that you're suffering, the most appropriate type of injunction is most likely going to be an injunction for protection against repeat violence. Now, obviously, as you can tell from the name, this means there has to be more than one incident. Now, that one of those two incidents has to happen within the past 6 months. So depending on who the person is that's abusing you and how many times or what type of abuse it is would determine what type of injunction to apply for. There's also an injunction for protection against stalking. This is a person that you're not domestically related to that is engaging in a course of conduct directed at you with no other legitimate purpose other than to harass or not annoy you, and which harassment is likely to cause and does cause substantial emotional distress. So we want to make sure that seniors know that there's all different types of injunctions out there. So even if maybe it doesn't fall under the domestic violence injunction because you've never lived as if a family, maybe the repeat violence is appropriate for you, or maybe stalking. Oftentimes seniors run into issues with their neighbors that maybe there's a disagreement and they feel unsafe. Because of that, an injunction for protection against repeat violence may be appropriate for you. Now, how do I petition for an injunction? Often seniors maybe they feel as if they don't have a way to get to the courthouse. Maybe they have issues with reading or writing. There's multiple places that you can physically go to petition for an injunction, and that's either at the second floor of the Broward County Courthouse located in Fort Lauderdale. You still have to wear a mask, and we're open 8:30 to 5 p.m. Or you can go to the West Satellite Courthouse located in Plantation. Now, if you're seeking to file a petition after hours on the weekend, you can call Women in Distress of Broward Crisis Line to determine if you're eligible to file outside of the business hours. And we'll provide all of this information after the presentation. You'll be able to access all of these phone numbers and all of these websites. You can also always check the court website in order to make sure what the current situation is where you can apply. And if you're one of those people that feels like I physically can't get to the courthouse in order to petition for an injunction, you can apply for our services at Coast to Coast Legal Aid of South Florida. If after we review your case file and there's no conflict and we're able to represent you, we may be able to assist you with filing for your petition online. Now, currently, it looks like the courthouse is going to be fully opened up soon. So it seems that the hearings will be happening in person and not via Zoom. If there is an issue with transportation, we would be able to either provide a referral or can assist with helping with transportation to a hearing if we are representing. So I started to briefly talk about some of the reasons seniors may hesitate to report abuse. Some of the reasons could be if a senior has been in a relationship with their spouse for a very long time, they may have never worked before and are completely financially reliant on their spouse. And they feel as though they have nowhere else to go. They don't even know how to pay the house bills. These are all extremely legitimate concerns that can cause any number of victims to hesitate or delay in petitioning for an injunction or reporting abuse. They also might just be physically dependent on either their caretaker or their spouse for physical medical care. They may not be able to get around, and they feel that even with this person gone, well, then who is going to be there to take care of them? They may or may not feel like they have adequate funding in order to pay someone to do the role that somebody else was previously doing just as their partner. They also might obviously have a fear of retaliation from their spouse, depending on how abusive the relationship is. And of course, there's always the community stigma of not wanting the whole neighborhood to know that you're having marital troubles. And as we already touched on, is they may be disabled or unable to drive to the courthouse, or maybe even unable to physically write a narrative in your petition. So all of these are things that we're hoping through this presentation will show you that while these hesitations are legitimate, that there are certain things that maybe can assure you why you should still maybe go forward and empower you that you can seek this assistance. So for people who are financially dependent, if you live with your abuser, you can request temporary exclusive use and possession of the home, and you can also ask for temporary support or alimony in your petition for injunction protection. It'll be up to the judge whether or not to award this, and it will be at their discretion based on both the petitioner's need and the respondent's ability to pay. Now, often with seniors, they may be in a long-term relationship and if a long-term marriage, which is more than 17 years. And in that situation, alimony is more likely to be awarded in a dissolution of marriage case down the line. And so it is more likely to be awarded in the injunction case as well on a temporary basis based on that relationship. So although these things will provide you with a safety net in terms of that you might be able to stay in the home and they may be able to provide you with some funding, we still always recommend having a safety plan, because it is a big deal to leave the person that you've been with for a very large chunk of your life. So we do refer people to both No More Tears and to Jewish Goodman Family Services in order to help people to set up a safety plan, to figure out how they're going to support themselves, whether or not they're able to stay in the place they're currently living or not will depend. And an injunction will order that they are not only not allowed to physically be in the home, but they're not allowed to have indirect contact with you either. All right, so if there anyone, can I report this abuse to anyone else? Individuals obviously should call 911 if you're in immediate danger. But you can also report any of these if you believe you're a victim of abuse or neglect, or believe someone else is a victim of abuse or neglect. You can report this to Adult Protective Services, or APS, which is a department through Department of Children and Families. So there's a phone number you can call to report the abuse, which is listed here, or you can also report the abuse online. APS is responsible for preventing further harm to vulnerable adults who are victims of abuse, neglect, exploitation, or financial abuse. Oh, I apologize. I stopped sharing my screen. Hold on. Give me a second. Hold on. Okay, there we're back, sorry. And now what the role of APS is to do an on-site investigation of reports of alleged abuse, to determine immediate risk to the victim and provision of necessary emergency services, evaluation of the need for and provision of protective supervision, and provision of ongoing protective services. So depending on what you're going through, they may be able to provide a variety of services. I've heard of APS offering to assist someone with petitioning for an injunction. I've heard of APS offering to come to the home to help them proceed with that, in addition to obviously opening up an investigation, looking into both financial exploitation in addition to physical abuse. All right, and now lastly is how to apply for CCLA services. Now our family unit can be reached at 954-736-2495. You can also apply online anytime for services. Now, if you're a victim of some other crime other than intimate partner violence and you're not a senior, then you can always apply with Legal Aid Service of Broward County at 954-765-8950. So overall, what we can learn from today's presentation is that seniors should know that while their concerns about moving forward with an injunction are legitimate, that there are certain protections in both that an injunction and APS can provide you with that can hopefully allow you to feel empowered to move forward with your injunction case or with reporting to APS. And additionally, it is by Florida statute, it is required that if any person who knows or has reasonable cause to suspect any abuse of a vulnerable adult, that they should also report that to Florida Abuse Hotline. We want people to know that our doors are, even though our physical doors may not be open at this current time, that we're still open for you to apply for our services. And if transportation is your issue, that is certainly something that we are used to dealing with, and that we will be able to assist you with that. And most important is really, if you are not sure what type of injunction you're supposed to apply for, if you apply for our services, we may be able to provide you advice and counsel to explain to you which type of an injunction you should be filing for. The injunctions that we usually will, that we most often represent are domestic violence injunctions, because of them being related by marriage or by blood. And in these types of injunctions, you only have to be believe that you are in imminent danger of becoming the victim of domestic violence. This is the only injunction that doesn't require the act itself to have already occurred. Merely the fact that you have reasonable cause to believe that it may occur can be enough, because you are living with that person. So the court recognizes that you're uniquely at a higher risk of violence occurring. So please feel free, if you're unsure whether or not you should file for an injunction, you can always call our office in order to apply, so that we can provide you either with advice and counsel, or represent you, or help you petition for that injunction without having to physically go to the courthouse. If we don't have the answer, we work with a lot of different community partners in order to fill any gaps in the representation that we're not able to fill. So again, please do not hesitate to at least apply for our services and ask questions about whether or not we'd be able to represent you, even if you are hesitant to file the petition yourself at this time. Thank you so much for coming here this week for our weekly legal learning this week on Elder Abuse Awareness Month. And again, thanks for tuning in, and keep tuning in the following weeks to see what other presentations that we'll be able to give you. Thanks.